It was a sun-drenched, dazzling, almost golden afternoon in London. The sky was an immaculate blue, not a single cloud marring its expanse, as if it had cleansed itself to bear witness to the grandeur of this moment. The air was filled with a gentle breeze, dancing through the leaves of the ancient trees in the park, while the distant chirping of birds blended with the city's distant hum, accompanying the park's tranquility like a melody. Hyde Park's verdant expanses bloomed with all the generosity of spring, its flower beds a riot of 1,000 colors, each blossom seemingly whispering its own story. Historic trees, bearing witness to centuries, cast their shadows generously, offering a cool sanctuary to visitors. At the park's entrance, a spot where centuries of history breathed and traditions had taken root, where every stone told a tale, stood Major Daniel, a royal guard, unwavering like a living symbol of time and tradition, in his ancient, magnificent uniform, resembling a monument. Every stitch of his uniform was meticulously woven, every piece of fabric carried the dust of history. It was far more than mere clothing, it was the embodiment of a heritage, a nation's identity, and honor. Daniel was not just a man of flesh and bone, he was the materialized essence of centuries of history, culture, and a nation. Every detail of his uniform seemed to whisper tales of centuries past, the gleaming buttons, the precisely stitched fabric, the high-quality leather boots, each an individual masterpiece of meticulousness and tradition. Daniel's stance was like the central figure in a painting, everything around him served to elevate his presence. Crowds flocked to see him, to take photographs with him, each captivated by his silent majesty. Children gazed at this tall, motionless soldier with awe, some whispering to their mothers, "Is he a statue?" questioning his very reality. Daniel's eyes were fixed on the horizon, yet internally he scanned his entire surroundings, missing not the slightest detail. He was like an observer who saw everything but reacted to nothing, a philosopher watching life from a distance, observing the complexities of human nature. For him, this stance was more than a duty, it was a way of life. With every breath, he felt his allegiance to his country, an allegiance that flowed through his veins, nourishing every cell of his being. His mind filtered the chaos of the outside world, taking in only the information necessary for his duty, discarding all else. Daniel lived every second of this moment with his whole being, yet kept his body in perfect stillness. In his mind, the discipline rules he had learned since childhood echoed: be calm, focus, be patient. These rules were not just military directives, but the cornerstones of his philosophy of existence. He was not merely a guard, he was a warrior of steel-like resolve, who had spent 8 years on these watches, every muscle fiber feeling the deep meaning of patience, control, and duty consciousness to his very core. These 8 years had hardened him not just physically but also mentally. Standing in the same spot, with the same discipline, day after day, though outwardly simple, required incredible inner strength. For this stance was not merely a physical act, but a demonstration of spirit and will. Waking up at the same hour every morning, following the same routine, not deviating from even the smallest rule. All these things made Daniel who he was, making him so strong and unshakable. His mind was calm and clear, no external stimuli could distract him from his duty. He was like a master of meditation, but with the sole difference that the purpose of this meditation was not just inner peace, but absolute loyalty to duty. In his mind, every lesson he had learned in training, every exercise he had participated in, flowed like a film strip. Every movement, every breath, was a step taken for a purpose. He wasn't just standing guard, he was a living testament to British history, culture, and military tradition, like a book carrying the wisdom of centuries, every page a lesson, every sentence a teaching. While the crowd thought he was a statue, he saw himself as a shield, silently protecting the values of his nation. His spirit waved like his country's flag, with unshakable faith. Even then, no one knew that a storm was brewing in his shadow, that the most dramatic part of this silent hero's story was about to begin. Daniel, contrary to his outwardly motionless appearance, was constantly vigilant, always ready for duty. Years of training enabled him instinctively to notice even the slightest change around him. His eyes were constantly moving, scanning the crowd to catch the slightest anomaly, the slightest threat. He surveyed his surroundings with the keen intuition that years had brought. His ears picked out potentially dangerous sounds rising from among the whispers. He functioned like a radar, sensing every frequency, missing not the finest detail. For him, every moment contained a potential danger, and he was always prepared for these dangers. Every one of his senses was on high alert, his entire being focused on duty. This was not just a watch, this was the silent but determined protection of a heritage, a tradition, and the honor of a country. His belief in the sacredness of his duty was the source of his true strength and unshakable stance. He was not just a guard, but a sentinel, the guardian of the gate to his country's heart, of history and tradition. This silent waiting was actually the harbinger of a great storm. Like the ticking of a time bomb, the countdown had begun, progressing towards an irreversible end. Daniel felt this approaching threat deep within, literally breathing in the tension that hung in the air. The expressionless mask on his face was a reflection of this awakening within his inner world. But the park's tranquility, that perfect peace, would shatter in seconds. Everything would change in the blink of an eye. Just then, as if sprung from a movie scene, a sleek, gleaming black sports car with chrome details, a latest model, ostentatious vehicle, approached the forbidden zone at an incredible speed, disregarding the park's serenity and rules. The roar of its engine drowned out the bird songs, made the leaves of the trees tremble, and abruptly silenced the whispers of the crowd, drawing everyone's attention. The thin, high-pitched screech of its tires on the asphalt suddenly turned into a rising roar, echoing through the park, growing louder as it reverberated. The car's engine, roaring in the stillness of this historic area, drew everyone's attention. It was as if a monster had awakened, tearing through the silence. This sound was not just an engine noise, but also a blare of disrespect and arrogance, a challenge to civilization, an insult. Eyes widened in shock as three figures emerged from the vehicle. In their walk, their posture, even their breaths, there was an air of audacity, a defiance, an attitude of those who considered themselves above these rules, challenging everything, as if born to defy. In their eyes shone a blatant contempt for laws and authority, as if laws did not apply to them. This was not just a car, but a symbol of arrogance and recklessness, a show of force, directly targeting society's weakest point. Their leader was a man known in street jargon as Blade, conspicuous with his shiny, expensive suit and aggressive demeanor, standing like a gladiator. His face bore a dismissive, mocking, arrogant expression. His eyes were fixed on Daniel's uniform. Clearly, he disdained him, seeing him not as an obstacle, but as a source of amusement, a toy. Blade's posture was a mix of self-assurance and recklessness. He acted as if everything belonged to him, as if the rules of this world were not written for him. He made his own rules, the sovereign of his own kingdom. His hand constantly went in and out of his inner suit pocket, as if searching for something, perhaps a symbol of power, or maybe just a cigarette packet, but even this gesture carried an element of threat, creating tension, like planting a landmine. A sarcastic smirk appeared at the corner of his lips, as if he was enjoying every moment of this scene. Everything was a game for him, a theatrical performance. The crude energy Blade radiated had completely disrupted the park's peace. Beside him was Echo, a skinny but cunning-eyed man, holding up his latest model, expensive phone, ready to record every moment, shielding himself with it. He was like a cameraman who didn't want to miss this moment. He wanted to immortalize every second, to make it go viral on social media, to present a show to his followers, to win a victory in the virtual world, to become famous. And Shade, a muscular figure standing like a threatening shadow. Shade's shoulders were broad, his neck thick, he looked ready for a fight at any moment, and in his eyes, a dark defiance gleamed, sparks of violence. Their body language screamed, "We are here and rules don't apply to us," openly challenging the entire world, every movement a rebellion, an uprising. They were the type to disregard the rules of this city, the traditions of this country, and even the most basic rules of respect required of civilized people, seeing themselves above everything, their arrogance evident in every aspect, believing in the weakness of civilization, and that brute force and ostentation were the only powers. In their eyes, there was an emptiness that saw Daniel as merely a photo frame, an inanimate object, a puppet, a soulless object. They didn't see him as a threat, only as a target they could amuse themselves with. This would be their greatest illusion, for before them stood not just a uniform, but a resistance hardened by centuries of accumulation, the unshakable spirit of a nation, a legend, a mountain. Ignoring the tourists and the silent discipline, led by Blade, they swaggered directly towards where Major Daniel stood. Their steps were heavy, threatening. It was as if they were crushing the ground with every step, leaving a heavy mark, as if the entire park belonged to them. They commanded everything, like an invasion. A murmur rose from the crowd, whispers turning into an anxious chorus. What's happening? What are they trying to do? What will the soldier do? Will he react? Or will he stay silent? What audacity! Will they touch him? Will there be trouble? Questions hung in the air, each person waiting nervously for what would happen in the next second. A wave of uneasiness began to engulf the crowd. Some retreated, trying to distance themselves from potential danger, pulling their children close, seeking a safe place. Others leaned forward with curiosity, not wanting to miss this dramatic moment, wanting to bear witness to it. Phones rose into the air, ready to record every moment, wanting to immortalize this instant, to record it for history. The atmosphere was tense, as if a big explosion was imminent. A spark could ignite at any moment. A cloud of tension hung over the entire park, breaths held. The waiting became more unbearable with each passing second. The crowd literally held its breath. Everyone wondered what Daniel would do, how he would respond to this insolence. Daniel remained calm. But this calm was the silence before a storm. Like the tranquility before a volcano erupts, a colossal power was building beneath, approaching its end, the silence of the apocalypse. Within him, the power of thousands of years of heritage was awakening. Blade approached Daniel with a mocking smile. His face held a condescending expression, in his eyes, a glint of amusement, as if this was just entertainment for him, a stage play, a circus. It was as if this situation was simply a show, a means of amusement for him, content to be shared on social media, bringing them fame, a viral video. In every one of his steps, the arrogance and disdain were so palpable that it was as if he had come not just to disrespect Daniel, but everything he represented, all British traditions and rules, like a destroyer, challenging everything, a symbol of decay. He walked as if to step on the royal guard's polished, spotless boots, as if to defile them, every step a defiance. It was as if he was not only invading Daniel's personal space but also denying his very existence. He saw him as an object, an obstacle, like a puppet, a soulless thing. Then he leaned in close to Daniel's face, almost uncomfortably, harassingly, close enough to feel his breath. He scorned Daniel's unshakable silence, that noble posture. It was as if he was dealing not with a human being, but a mannequin. This was not just a challenge, but an insult, a humiliation, a blatant attack on the values of a country, a nationally dishonorable act, the desecration of something sacred. The crowd watched Blade's every move, holding their breath. The air was tense, an explosion was expected at any moment. No police or other officials were visible. Daniel was alone with this challenge, this humiliation. But he was not truly alone. Behind him stood centuries of history, an army, and the honor of a nation. Every thread of his uniform was a part of this honor. This was not just Daniel's test, but the test of an entire nation, a national stance, a silent cry, a resistance. Then he did something unbelievable. He reached out his hand towards Daniel's rifle bayonet. This was not just a challenge, but one of the greatest insults to the sacred honor and duty of the Royal Guards, an affront to history, tradition, and discipline. This was far more than just a weapon. This was a symbol of Daniel's sworn duty, the values he protected, the independence of his country. This bayonet represented the honor and strength of British soldiers. Touching it was touching all these values, touching the heart and soul of a country, crossing a red line, reaching for something sacred. Blade, looking into Daniel's icy, unreadable eyes, whispered in a provoking, condescending voice, "Go on then, do something." His voice was laced with mockery, his eyes with arrogance, every syllable a challenge, every word a humiliation. It was as if he was making a special effort to provoke Daniel, to push him beyond his limits, to dehumanize him, to break his discipline, to test his nobility. Are you a puppet, or a real soldier? This question was not just an insult to Daniel, but to all the military discipline, honor, and sacrifice he represented, to all the values of a country. Blade glanced at Echo, signaling him to record and broadcast this moment. The light from Echo's phone flashed, as if illuminating the gloom of that moment. The whole world would watch this humiliation live. Blade felt himself on the verge of victory. This would be a simple amusement, a moment of triumph for him, a gateway to fame, a tool for popularity. But he was wrong, terribly wrong. Because Daniel's silence was the greatest sign of the storm, the beginning of a deluge, the collapse of the monument of arrogance, the herald of destruction. This whisper, then, would be the beginning of Blade's greatest illusion, the genesis of his end. This whisper would also ignite the fuse of that silent hero's power, which had accumulated over years, a power that would explode with a silent answer, astonishing everyone. Blade fancied himself the master of the world. Daniel, however, was about to teach him who the true master of the world and of discipline truly was. This would be not just a physical encounter, but a story of the triumph of values, discipline, and honor over arrogance. Daniel had been preparing for this moment his entire life. Every training session, every hour on duty, was a step towards this instant. His posture was not merely the result of years, but of centuries of accumulated wisdom. This was not just a reaction, but a lesson, a warning, the power of silence, the breaking point of arrogance. And now, that moment had arrived. Time stood still, all eyes turned to Daniel. The crowd breathlessly awaited Daniel's response to Blade's provocation. Everyone would bear witness to this historic moment, an instant that would be etched into memory, passed down from generation to generation. In Daniel's inner world, the wisdom of ages, the spirit of his ancestors, and the sacredness of his duty had converged. He was not a robot, he was a human being, yet he controlled himself with superhuman discipline. Blade's insolence had not disturbed his calm in the slightest. On the contrary, this provocation had sharpened Daniel's iron will even further. The whispers among the crowd intensified after Blade's "Go on, do something" challenge. Everyone felt that the tension had reached its breaking point. The weight became more unbearable with each passing second. In less than a tenth of a second, in what felt like a blink of an eye, as if watching an illusion, that arrogant trio writhed in pain, sprawled on the pavement. Everything happened so fast and surprisingly, like a dream, yet this was no dream, but the perfect reflexes of a hardened soldier, forged by years of effort. Major Daniel, with years of military training, had moved with unexpected speed and mastery. His movement was so fluid and controlled, he was like a ballet dancer, only his dance possessed a destructive precision. Every one of his moves, perfected through years of repetition, was a flawless mechanical marvel, truly a work of art. Daniel had moved like lightning. He was difficult to follow with the naked eye, a superhuman speed. His actions were not an instantaneous burst of anger, but the natural outcome of years of planned training and discipline. Every muscle, every nerve, seemed programmed for this moment, like a computer. He was a warrior come to life from a statue, an unexpected hero, a sudden storm, like a hurricane. First, he turned to Blade. He grabbed Blade's hand, which had reached for the bayonet, with an inconceivable speed, skillfully twisting his wrist and bringing him to the ground. On Blade's face, arrogance suddenly gave way to pure pain and astonishment. His eyes widened, his mouth hung open, the arrogant expression that had challenged moments before was replaced by terror, a complete rout. What happened? He mumbled, as Daniel had already turned to Echo. Echo, before he could even raise his phone to record what was happening, was thrown into the air by Daniel's powerful but controlled blow and landed flat on his back. His phone flew from his hand, shattering into pieces. Echo's face, meanwhile, showed indescribable fear and shock. The images he had captured would never be broadcast. The triumph of arrogance had turned into defeat. All his plans had fallen through. The virtual world could not save them. The real world had won. Shade, trying to protect himself with his muscular body, was sent flying by Daniel's perfect throwing technique and landed on the pavement beside the other two. Shade's massive body felt light as a feather against Daniel. His strength became meaningless against discipline. The inadequacy of brute force was revealed. They writhed in pain, helpless. This was not an attack, but the embodiment of years of training, discipline, and duty consciousness. Every movement was precise as a textbook, purposeful. Strength was used not with anger, but with complete control. Daniel's actions were not merely self-defense, but were done to protect his duty, his country, and the honor of that sacred uniform. This was a momentary flash, a lesson, a warning, a small but significant mark on the wheel of history. And all this happened in just a few seconds. It was as if a time warp had occurred, reality had shifted, as if a movie scene had come to life, before everyone's eyes, an unforgettable moment. As if nothing had happened, he returned to his position. The same stiff posture, the same silence. Not a hint of breathlessness, not a drop of sweat, not the slightest flicker of emotion on his face. His expression was like an iron mask, unshakable. His uniform was still immaculate, his cap not shifted a millimeter. This was a lesson in discipline for the onlookers, a display of power. It was also proof that appearances can be deceiving, that immense power can lie beneath silence. As those three men knelt before Daniel, they were defeated not only physically but also spiritually. Their arrogance had crashed against the wall of discipline and honor. It had shattered. This moment would be etched into their memories forever. Their shame would accompany them like a scar throughout their lives. They wished the ground would swallow them whole. Daniel, through this incident, had cemented his identity not only as a soldier but as a hero, making a silent mark in history, a mark that would be passed down to future generations, like a legend, a cautionary tale. Daniel's unshakable stance was not merely a physical reaction, it was also a message. A message that proclaimed that insolence, disrespect, and impertinence would always be defeated by true values. In that moment, in Daniel's eyes, one could read the traces of all the rigorous training he had endured, all the sacrifices he had made, all the sleepless nights. This reaction was not an instantaneous decision, but the outward expression of years of accumulated wisdom, knowledge, and experience. The surrounding crowd first froze in astonishment. Eyes were wide with disbelief, breaths were held. No one expected such a reaction. For a royal guard to move so quickly, so effectively, and so controllably was out of the ordinary. It was almost like a miracle, like the birth of a legend. After a moment of silence, they began to applaud with great admiration. The applause began sporadically, then quickly swelled into a chorus, echoing through the park. The sound spread throughout Hyde Park, reverberating among the trees, growing louder as they echoed, like a championship celebration. People whistled, shouted, expressing their respect and appreciation for Daniel. Some, unable to conceal their astonishment, looked at each other, whispering, "I can't believe it," while others tried to record the moment with their cell phones. A video that would quickly go viral on social media, serving as a lesson. The images would show Major Daniel's honorable stance to the entire world. It would prove how arrogance resulted in defeat. It would display the cost of disrespect for authority, and it would shout that respect was earned. In that moment, it was understood that Daniel was not just a ceremonial soldier, but a true warrior, conscious of his duty, a hero who protected his honor. This was not just a show, this was a perfect demonstration of how discipline and control triumphed over arrogance and disrespect. As Blade and his companions writhed in pain, the crowd focused not on them, but on Daniel. This was their deserved shame and Daniel's deserved appreciation. Their shame was as great as their pain, their faces flushed, their eyes fixed on the ground. They wanted to escape this humiliating situation as quickly as possible, as if they wished the earth would swallow them. A few minutes later, police officers arrived at the scene. The crowd made way for them, everyone's face still bearing expressions of astonishment and admiration. When the police arrived, the situation had already calmed down. Major Daniel, without uttering a single word, without even a single facial expression, had answered all questions with his actions. No statement was needed, no defense. Even the police officers appreciated Daniel's calm demeanor and the flawless way the incident was resolved. They had witnessed a military legend, and they would proudly note this moment in their official reports. Perhaps this event would even serve as an inspiration for some police officers, prompting them to reflect on their own sense of duty. Daniel's stance would serve as an example, a touchstone. True power does not reveal itself, it only emerges when needed, at the most unexpected moment, when most urgently required, and at that instant, the whole world stops and watches. Daniel once again proved that the royal guards are not merely a symbol, but living monuments representing the unshakable spirit, discipline, and honor of the British nation. This event would be passed down from mouth to mouth within the park, transmitted from generation to generation, reminding everyone once more how important discipline and respect are. Arrogance, in the end, always kneels. Honor and discipline, however, always stand tall. This story was not just a soldier's tale, but a universal lesson for all humanity. The power of respect, patience, and duty consciousness is superior to all forms of bullying, all forms of insolence. This lesson would not only echo through the streets of London, but would spread throughout the world, raising the banner of honesty and honor. That moment had been a turning point. An ordinary day had transformed into a legendary epic, written in the annals of history, in golden letters. This incident began with a small spark in the heart of London, but its impact spread globally, embedding itself in people's subconscious. Dear viewers, this story once again clearly demonstrates that appearances can be deceiving, and that true power lies not in outward muscles or arrogant words, but in inner discipline, dignity, patience, and your unwavering commitment to your values. Just like Major Daniel, sometimes the most powerful response is hidden in silence and action. This silence, in fact, carries a message more powerful than 1,000 words, like a philosophy, a manifesto, a guide to life. Remember that at the foundation of every civilization lie respect and discipline. Upholding these values makes us stronger not only individually but also as a society, enabling us to build a more honorable future. This incident is not just a guard's reaction, but also a symbol of a nation's devotion to its values. Each of us can apply this lesson of discipline and honor in our own lives, because these values are not just for soldiers, but are valid for everyone in every area of life, in business, family relationships, friendships, neighborly relations, everywhere, at all times. This story is a unique example of how arrogance, disrespect, and judgment are defeated by true power. Daniel's calm but effective reaction proved that a royal guard is not just a ceremonial figure, but also the product of years of rigorous training and unshakable determination. His stance taught what it means to remain true to one's values despite all kinds of external provocation. This story is not just a recounting of an event, but also an ode to the power of the human spirit, the might of discipline, and the priceless value of honor. It reminds us that even in the most difficult moments, we must not forget who we are and what we represent. True heroism sometimes emerges in the quietest moments, in the most unexpected ways, and gives a lesson to the entire world. This story is a lesson that will be remembered for generations. It is also a call to uphold our own values, to respect others, and to understand that true power lies not in outward appearance, but in character. Each of us, in our own way, can carry on Major Daniel's legacy. His story whispers to us that there is a Major Daniel within each of us. The important thing is to bring him out, to listen to him, to heed his voice. This incident was far more than just a momentary conflict. It was like a monument, proclaiming the values of a society, the strength of a tradition, and the importance of individual discipline to the entire world. Major Daniel, that day, protected not only himself or his uniform, but also the soul of the British people. He transformed a day that began like any ordinary guard duty into a heroic epic that made history. His unshakable stance showed how empty and meaningless disrespect and arrogance are, and that true respect can only be earned through discipline and adherence to values. People from all walks of life would learn from this incident and reassess their own behavior. Politicians would understand what the public expected from this event. Academics would study this event as a sociological case. Future generations might read this story, watch this video, and draw inspiration from Major Daniel's stance. They, too, would learn how to stand firm against arrogance and prejudice in difficult moments, and that silence and nobility can be the greatest weapons. This story will continue to be a beacon of hope, a source of inspiration, forever, taking its place in humanity's collective memory. Every year, visitors coming to that spot in Hyde Park where Daniel stood guard would whisper this story to each other, passing this lesson on to future generations. If this story also deeply affected and inspired you, please don't forget to like it. To discover more true stories and lessons of honor, subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon to turn on notifications. Also, let us know in the comments who you want to see this video and help us reach a wider audience by sharing this important message on social media. Remember, true power isn't about tearing others down, but about building up with your commitment to values. See you in our next story. Goodbye.